Hello and welcome to Book XVI, Book 16 of the Odyssey. In our last exciting episode, we saw Telemachus. We took Telemachus right up to the threshold of the swineherd's compound, where all the pigs are, and that is Eumaeus. And we have a repeat of the curious incident that we saw in Odysseus, when Odysseus approaches the compound. I said there that there's three distinct actions of the dog barking. As Sherlock Holmes said in the Adventure of the Silver Blaze, he said, "I direct your attention to the curious incident of what the dog did in the nighttime." And Watson is confused. He said, "But the dog did nothing in the nighttime." And he said, "That was the curious thing." Okay, so the behavior of the dogs. I think Conan Doyle probably had this element of the Odyssey in mind. Is that the dogs barking, the dog's response, helps us to characterize each of the three people who come. Now, remember, we talked about the irony of the dogs barking at Odysseus, because Odysseus is the returning king, and so he should be lionized, he should be welcomed, he should be feted, or fatted, whatever. No, the calf is fatted. Although I've been getting more exercise, so my calves are not as fat as they used to be. Telemachus now comes. So Odysseus had come. The dogs bark, and we said how ironic that was, because he's the king, and they're the lowest creatures. The dogs are treating him badly, but Telemachus comes, and the dogs fawn. Right? They're happy to see him, so they obviously know him. So a conscious contrast to the dogs barking at Odysseus. In Telemachus coming to Eumaeus's compound, he has nothing new to offer. Eumaeus has acted as the host in the guest-host relationship in the laws of Xenia. So Eumaeus has shown himself to be righteous in his response. But Telemachus here can make it official, right? By being the prince now. Offering or kind of adding his approval then to the hospitality to the stranger. "Father, where did this stranger come from?" he asks Eumaeus. Okay, wait a minute, Eumaeus isn't his father. Well, there's a great irony there too. It's definitely the Greek word pater, father, here, but actually, in the English-speaking tradition, we have the same idiom, but it's kind of old-fashioned. It's kind of dropped out of favor. In calling an elderly man father or an elderly man mother, you are giving them a title of respect instead of saying, "Oh, you're an old man" or "you're an old woman." Now, in fact, they may not have any children, but it's a sign of respect, just as maybe that's why it's fell out of favor, because the implication of the word father is respect and obedience, but we no longer have that implication with fatherhood. So hence the concept disappears. But it's ironic that he uses that term, and maybe I've got to stop saying ironic. It's significant in several ways. One, because it's probably a truth, because Eumaeus is a kind of a spiritual or a surrogate father for Telemachus. Telemachus, who is in need of a father, and it's ironic that he goes to this slave, essentially, this servant Eumaeus, for fatherly nurturing, and also it means that he's staying away from the riches of the palace, that he's here in the hovel, and that the hovel is preferable to the palace if there's nicer more righteous people there. So he says, Father, where did the stranger come from? How did sailors bring him to Ithaca? What men do they claim to be? So he wants so as prince, he wants to know all of the things that a guest friend, a stranger, usually tells you in the period of Xenia. But he wants to be in the loop. He wants to be informed of everything that the process of Xenia has revealed. And so Eumaeus' answer. Well then, my child, I shall tell you all of the truth. He declares he is the race. Notice how that sentence is constructed. He says, but we've seen that, in fact, we know that Odysseus has not told the truth, because the truth is, I am actually the king of this realm, and I'm here in disguise. He says he's been to cities of mortals and is wandering, and that part's true. For that was the way the gods spun his thread, and now having escaped from a ship of the Thesprotians, he has come to my hut, and I hand him over to you. Do as you wish. Okay, that's the proper answer, right? Because Telemachus is the de facto authority, even though that authority is not recognized by the suitors. But Eumaeus does the right thing, the righteous thing, the pious thing. He says, you, Telemachus, you decide. He declares he is a suppliant to you. Okay, so by placing himself at the mercy of Telemachus, or of the kingdom, in essence, Odysseus is supplicating Telemachus. This is where Telemachus explains something that I've been talking about all through the discussion of this work, but now we see it in more detail. Line 116. This is the explanation of why Telemachus is in such a fix, and why he hasn't done anything about it until now. The normal response is to gather all your male relatives, your uncles, your cousins, your brothers, and stand up to these bullies. But this is what Telemachus points out. For thus did the son of Cronos make ours a single line. The son of Cronos, of course, Zeus. Arcesius sired Laertes, a single son, and his father sired Odysseus alone. Odysseus sired me alone and left me in the halls. Okay. So, in fact, we have a single son of a single son of a single son. So for 3 generations, we have no male relatives, okay, other than dads and granddads, okay? So there is no recourse. There's nobody to help us. Now, Telemachus' grandfather is still alive, Laertes, but he has given up the palace life. He has, because it's become so corrupt. He's gone off and he's living in the outskirts. Athena, for a brief moment, for this reunion here, this is a kind of an anagnoresis scene. We'll talk about that line. I'll write it on the board and make sure we understand it. A recognition scene, what Aristotle called anagnoresis, a recognition scene. He said that's essential to any kind of a plot. I can think of a number of stories that succeed quite well without it, but maybe you can make an argument for its universality, as Aristotle suggested. But Athena says, now is the time to take away the mist. Now is the time for you to return to your own shape. He has been this dirty beggar, and that's the reason why nobody expected too much of him. But to give Telemachus some confidence to show that this is indeed his powerful father, Athena is going to take away the mist. But first she has to show up at the swineherd's house, and this is the 3rd case of the barking dogs. She comes up, and now, so we have 3 distinct reactions. The first one with Odysseus, bark, 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 bark. Second one with Telemachus, fawn, 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 fawn. They're wagging their tails and looking up at Odysseus, or at Telemachus. Now, it's kind of like the horse's reaction to Frau Blücher in Young Frankenstein. It is that animal, visceral fear of the supernatural, and gods certainly are supernatural. So Odysseus and the dogs saw her, we're told, line 162. They did not bark. They slunk with a whimpering to the other side of the lodge. Okay, that's the way dogs respond in all of the horror movies when they encounter something supernatural. They're vicious at any they bristle and they're ready to fight any intruder, but a supernatural presence scares the bejeebers out of them. Okay, and if you've ever seen a dog without any bejeebers, then you know how horrifying that can be. Odysseus now, this is the inauguratus scene, revealing himself to Telemachus. And we get a very surprising reaction. Telemachus has been waiting all of his life for this moment, the return of his father, and his response is, actually, it's essentially the same response as Mark Hamill's, right? "You're not my father," he says. "You surely are not my father, Odysseus," line 194. "But some god enchants me, so that I may grieve and lament still more." Any excuse to cry in this story. "For in no way would a mortal man in his own mind devise these things, unless a god came by in person, who might easily, if he wished, make one young or old." Okay, but Odysseus insists and says, line 202, "Telemachus, it is not seemly when your father is within to wonder exceedingly and to be amazed. No other Odysseus indeed shall ever come to you here. I am the very man. Suffering evils, wandering much, I have come in the 20th year to my fatherland." Okay, a very momentous moment, if that's not redundantly redundant, when he announces who he is and says, "I have returned." And so now he's going to plot the revenge. The first thing he does is to count. And if you add up all of those 52 out of Dulichian and 6 servants with them, if you include the servants, it's 118 people against basically Odysseus and Telemachus. Now, we're going to even out those odds. Does that make sense mathematically, evening odds? There's going to be, you're going to get some help from Eumaeus and actually another herder when he will join them later. But as ridiculous as those odds are, now of course this is a larger-than-life kind of a divine story, or a story with a divine element, and so you expect some exaggeration, okay? And that's part of the adventure tale, right? The hero being larger than life. But Homer takes great pains to make this actually plausible. First of all, Odysseus is larger than life, right? He is stronger than most men. We see that with the bow. He's the only one who can string the bow. Secondly, he's got the element of surprise. Remember, the disguise is going to go back on, the mist is going to go back on, and Telemachus is going to hide the weapons, okay, so that the suitors can't quick grab their weapons. So they'll work it out so that everything will fall out as planned. We switch immediately to that scene then, immediately after telling that, revealing his plan, we switch to the suitors, and they're plotting because they're upset because Telemachus has been successful. And so Antinous says, well, let's plot another ambush. Let's just kill him now that he's home. Anthinomus, however, says, well, let's check with the gods. Medon, in the meantime, this is how Medon saves his life. He's a herald. And so he goes to Penelope and tells about the suitor's plot. That marks him as one of the good guys. He helps the royal family. And so Penelope doesn't let it go. She confronts Antinous and says, I hear that you're plotting against my son. Knock it off. Eurymachus pretends that, this is horrible. He pretends he's going to protect Telemachus. So he kind of limps out. Okay. Well, this was a long discussion, unintentionally so. So we'll move on to book XVII. We'll run out of I's eventually. So 17 next time. Thank you for your patience with book 16, and we'll see you in the funny papers.